There's so much natural doubt that you have to deal with because it's a very uncertain industry. And yeah, I suppose even now, even though I've more and more behind me, and you feel more and more secure that you're on the right path, there's still doubts all the time. It's what it is. Yeah.
Did having parents and a sibling who had all high profile lives and careers, were they able to make sure that you didn't lose heart, as well as yourself and your own inner voice saying, don't lose heart?
I mean, I wish I could say that my parents and my brother have been very supportive, but I'd be lying, honestly. Like my mother and father, who are amazing parents, but my mother left when I was 10 and she was a model. And so I didn't really get that push from her. You know, she always helped me be free and stuff like that, but she wasn't really around. And then my father, I'm in the funniest discussion. I was about 16 years old. I've never really shared this with anyone. And he sat me down. He was like, so Dylan, you know, what are you going to do with your life? And I was like, you know, I don't know yet, but I'm only 16. And he's like, do you know what you should do? You should become an accountant and you should manage your brother's money. And I was like, sorry, Dad, I don't think that's what's in the cards for me. And he was like, no, you should really consider it. And I was like, all right, Dad. Well, my dad was a golfer and he didn't really understand the arts, but he knew Stuart was doing well. So my brother, honestly, from the age of about 17, he was like, don't do what I'm doing. Don't become an actor. It's terrible. It's really difficult. And he did the same with my sister, Chloe. And I don't know why he did that. Maybe he thought it was such a crazy industry, or maybe he didn't think I was meant for it. But it did have an impact on me because I looked up to him a lot. And at the time, I didn't do any acting courses, or I kind of went more into journalism, into writing, which is, you know, it's all perfect. It all ends up perfectly. But I think I would have definitely persevered naturally acting a little earlier, just to give it a go. And I think he talked me out of it because he was like, no, you don't want to do this. While I'm watching him like smashing it, you know, he's like living with Charlize in Hollywood. Like, yeah, it's a funny thing. I don't know what really happened there, but maybe he was protecting me at some level. Who knows? Irish work, like, because I still do. I still have like, I'd still say like 60% of my work is still Irish focused because I think there's so many great Irish stories that haven't been told. And it's cool being in LA and bringing American money to Ireland. It's a good setup as a producer right now, just with the tax incentives and how well Ireland is doing. But so I only began really writing American stories once I fully moved here. But so in that 4 years, I was doing stuff in Vancouver and then stuff that was more geared towards Ireland, like films that were in Ireland and TV shows in Vancouver. Now I have some very big TV. I've one really big TV project that I'm working on. I've been working on it for a year and a half writing it. And it's about Roger Casement. Do you know about Roger Casement?
Yeah, I've heard it's a historical name, but I can't remember why.
So Roger Casement, for me, he's like the greatest Irish humanitarian that ever lived. And no one's told his story properly. He was a gay man and he was executed for being gay in 1916. And he ended up, I'll paraphrase because I could talk for an hour about him. Because I've written a feature on him and now I've developed a TV series on the back of like a 5-part limited series. And for me, he was executed because he was gay at a time when being gay was not acceptable. And what he was at, the British Crown basically framed him with these diaries, the beginnings of MI6. A guy called Mansfield Cumming, he was the guy who framed Casement, who got him basically executed. And in these black diaries, they had him as these very pedophilic acts, and him as a gay man, but very dark stuff. And it's not confirmed yet, but many feel he was completely framed. And on my research, I've seen that Mansfield Cumming, who began MI6 in 1909, he began the whole idea of destroying reputation to frame someone. And at the time, Casement was a knighted British knight by the government of Britain. In 1911, he was knighted. In 1916, he was executed by the British. That's how much of a shift in terms of his reputation had changed. And he went to the Congo and he went to the Peru and he saved He literally saved the indigenous from extermination, and not many people know about this, but in 1903 in Iquitos in Peru, where the rubber was being harvested by a British company, in 1885 there was 100,000 indigenous people, and by 1903 there was 6,000 indigenous. So 94% of the indigenous had been wiped out in about 20 years due to the rubber boom. And Casement went down there with put himself in such incredibly dangerous situations with these tyrant, psychopaths who were killing all these indigenous. Managed to get in there, make friends with them, get information, and then deliver reports to the government in Britain. And within a year, Lloyd's lost their credit, destroyed the company within a year. And the entire backwater of Iquitos went back to a backwater, and everyone basically, and the natives began to replentify. And he did the same in the Congo in 1880. So for me, he's like the beginning of humanitarianism and one of the beginners of corporate responsibility, because he got corporates to like respect their workers in a way that they never done before. And so he's this great Irish hero, and a lot of people have focused on the last years in his life, and he was framed as a a German traitor, and that's why he was executed, for being gay and for aligning with the Germans. And what he had done is, in his last 2 years, he realized that the only way the Irish were going to fully gain independence was be armed. He said that if we're going to go up against the British Army, we need arms. And so he spent his last 2 years in Berlin with the Germans, trying to get the German guns to Ireland. And many thought, oh my God, he's a spy for the British, and all this very strange information came out. What actually happened to him is he managed, in the last week before the Easter Rising, he managed to get 29,000 guns and 1 million rounds of ammunition from the Germans. Like, what a legend. And he was known in Britain. He'd have tea with the president. So he made the Irish rebellion far more than just a small local rebellion. He turned into an international issue for the British, because he had helped the Irish. He brought these guns. They got scuppered outside Cork, went in the sea. The rebellion was quashed, and unfortunately we then had to divide our country because we were at a weaker position. We lost 6 of our counties, and that's why North and South happened. But if those guns had have arrived like planned, we would have had a real fighting chance of taking on the British, and we might have got our whole country at once. So he's that guy. He took the risk to go to go to Germany, get these guns, and arm the Irish so that they had a real fighting chance. And unfortunately, it just didn't happen that way. And the reason it didn't happen is he was being spied on by MI6 for 2 years. And they planted Ivan Christensen, a Norwegian spy, in his life, who took his heart. He fell in love for the first time in his life in his last 2 years. But what was happening was Ivan was sharing all of Roger's movements in his last 2 years with the British establishment. So when they brought the guns to the west of Ireland, they were taken. They were found, and the ship was blown up outside Cork, and then he was captured, brought to London, and executed alongside all the other Irish revolutionaries. So it's just this great piece of history, and I'm very passionate about it. And I spent the last year and a half working on it, and it's great. There's momentum building on it. I've got some really interesting conversations around it. So that one's cool, and I'm glad to share it with an Irish audience, because I feel like time has come for Casement's story to be told right. So yeah, that's my main project. But I have also a feature set in Peru and New York around a model who loses her leg from it's called Return to the Heart, and she ends up going to the Amazon and healing it with the tribe, and comes back and sets up charities, which is a beautiful female-led drama, completely female-led. And then I have another story in Ireland around the Asgard, which speared off from the Celt. And the Asgard is about the Howth gun running, where I'm from. I'm from Howth. And there's a great intrigue around what happened there. And it's actually a little bit of a spy story too, around this guy called Erskine Childers, who was he was British-Irish, again, like Casement, British-Irish, and I'm British-Irish. My dad is British and my mother's Irish. I feel like these stories are coming to me. So I won't go too much into that because I've talked about it a lot, but Childers and Molly Childers, the females on this boat are the reason why the guns got to Ireland. And no one's talked about this story. Like, there's these two, Molly Childers and Anne Spring Rice, they are the reason that the Irish were armed for the rebellion in 1916.